Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Sexpertise. It's February already. Crazy. Valentine's Day month, one of my favorites, especially given what I talk about. So, tonight's episode, we're going to be redefining romance and celebrating love beyond the norm. Perfect for this month and to set the tone for Valentine's Day vibes. So, today we're diving deep into the many facets of love and romance that extend beyond the traditional norms that we've come to expect. For centuries, society has constructed ideas about romance, often limiting what it can be and who it's for. But the truth is, romance isn't a one size fits all concept. It's something that can and should be defined by each person and relationship on their own terms. So, in this episode, we're going to celebrate diversity in relationships, looking at how polyamory, queer love, asexuality, and solo love, and many other types of romantic connections show us that love can be anything but traditional. Love comes in so many forms, and it's time we recognize that the most important thing is not fitting into society's mold, but finding a connection that feels right for you. And by the end of this episode, I hope that you'll be inspired to embrace love that is authentic, fulfilling, and true to your unique desires and needs. All right, so when we think of romance, the first things that come to mind might be roses, chocolates, candlelit dinners, or even grand gestures like surprise proposals. I mean, these are all beautiful and meaningful in their own ways, but are they the only way to define romance? What if romance could be so much more than that? We're going to explore how love can exist in many different forms, all of which deserve recognition and celebration. And it's not just about celebrating romantic relationships, it's also about recognizing that it's important to recognize self love and love in non traditional settings. So, in the next few segments, we'll discuss how romantic love has shifted over time, how the boundaries of intimacy have expanded, and how people are now embracing relationships that break free from conventional expectations, whether it's through polyamory, open relationships, queer love, or simply redefining romantic connections. We're opening up a conversation that acknowledges and celebrates the diverse ways people love and connect. So get ready to be inspired by how love has evolved and how you can redefine it on your own terms. Let's start with a simple question. What is romance really? For many of us, romance has been portrayed as one-on-one connection between two people, often involving deep emotional and physical intimacy. But the reality is, romance doesn't have to follow a strict set of rules or guidelines. It's about the feelings and connections that arise between people. Romance is about emotion, attraction, and personal connection, but it doesn't always look like a fairy tale. In fact, many would argue that romantic love is more than just a feeling. It's about creating space where you and your partner or partners can grow, explore, and experience each other authentically. Over time, society has constructed these boundaries around what romance should be. Movies, books, and songs often tell the story of one couple with their struggles, triumphs, and ultimate happily ever after. But if we dig deeper, we'll find that many people are exploring love in ways that go beyond that cookie cutter narrative. Whether you're someone who finds joy in polyamory, a couple building a life together without ever getting married, or even those who fall outside the traditional gendered expectations of romance, the way we approach love today is incredibly diverse. Romance, in its true form, is an individual experience. It's something each of us can define for ourselves based on our needs, desires, as well as our personal values. For centuries, romance was built on ideas that were tightly linked to marriage and monogamy, as well as gender roles. So think back to the early days. Romantic relationships were largely about alliances and survival and the creation of family units. The idea of romantic love as we understand it today, that really didn't emerge until the 18th and 19th centuries. During that time, love was framed as something that could develop and flourish between two people in a deep emotional and physical bond. However, even then, society still placed limits on what love was supposed to look like. Now, fast forward to the present day, and we can see how those historical constraints have loosened. Romance today doesn't have to follow a prescribed formula, and people are breaking free from past traditions to create relationships that honor their personal experiences. Now, with the rise of technology and online dating and the acceptance of queer relationships, this has also contributed to the shift. People no longer feel forced to fit into a specific mold, and more options are available than ever. A society becomes more progressive and inclusive, where the definition of romance continues to evolve. Whether you're in a non monogamous relationship, celebrating love without labels, or redefining what it means to connect with someone on a romantic level, the narrative of love is being rewritten daily. One of the most significant shifts, I would say, in modern romance has been the rise of polyamory, as well as open relationships. These types of relationships challenge the idea that romantic love can only be fulfilled with one person. Polyamory involves having romantic relationships with more than one person simultaneously, where all parties involved are aware of each other and consensually agree to the dynamics. Similarly, not the same, but similarly, open relationships allow couples to explore connections with others outside their partnership, with boundaries and rules set by the individuals involved. At first glance, some may assume that these types of relationships lack depth or seriousness, or the seriousness of monogamous relationships, but that could not be farther from the truth. In fact, polyamory and open relationships often require a level of communication, trust, and emotional intelligence that can be even more complex than traditional monogamous partnerships. In these relationships, honesty and openness are paramount. It's about creating healthy, non traditional dynamics that work for everyone involved. For many, polyamory provides a way to experience deep emotional connections and intimate bonds with multiple partners, sometimes in ways that monogamous relationships just can't fulfill. These connections are not inherently any less valuable or fulfilling. They just simply exist beyond the traditional bounds of romance. Queer love and same-sex romance. I have the sniffles. Another important aspect of redefining romance is the embrace of queer love and same-sex relationships. For too long, same-sex romance has been excluded from mainstream romantic narratives, often marginalized or misunderstood. However, in recent years, we've seen a tremendous shift in how LGBTQIA plus relationships are not only accepted but celebrated. The visibility of queer love, whether it's in same-sex relationships, bisexual relationships, pansexual love, or other non-heteronormative pairings, has opened up a more inclusive view of romance and love for everyone, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. What makes queer love unique isn't just partners involved, it's also the way queer individuals often have to navigate societal challenges, such as discrimination, lack of representation, and being misunderstood. Despite these hurdles, queer couples show us that love isn't about fitting into a specific box. It's about authenticity, connection, and being true to yourself and your partner. As same-sex marriages and queer relationships become more widely accepted, it's important to remember that love in any form is beautiful and valid. Celebrating queer love means acknowledging that love exists in a multitude of ways, and it should be recognized for its own distinct beauty. Did I skip a slide? Okay. So now we're going to talk about asexual and aromantic love. Love doesn't always have to be sexual, and it certainly doesn't always have to be romantic in the traditional sense. For many, asexuality and aromanticism are valid and deeply fulfilling ways of experiencing love. Asexual individuals don't experience sexual attraction in the same way others might, and aromantic individuals may not feel romantic attraction at all. However, this doesn't mean that they don't experience deep, meaningful connections with others. These connections are just expressed differently. For example, an asexual person may still form strong bonds with friends, family, or even romantic partners, but without the expectation of sexual intimacy. Similarly, aromantic individuals may not seek out romantic relationships in the traditional sense, but can still cultivate rich, loving relationships with others, often built on trust and affection, as well as companionship. The key takeaway here is that love and connection are not bound by sexual attraction or romantic labels. Asexual and aromantic individuals have the right to define their own romantic lives, just like anyone else. It's important to recognize these identities and create space for these individuals to thrive in love without feeling pressured to conform to traditional romantic expectations. I think my slides are a little screwed up on today's episode. That's okay. I am still going to continue and this will catch up to us. But now I want to talk about self-love. This is a big one. This is a big one, especially if you're someone watching this episode and you don't have a partner, and maybe you have felt that romance isn't something that you can have without someone else. Simply not true. I feel that One of the most significant ways to redefine romance is by embracing self-love and cultivating a healthy romantic relationship with yourself. For years, relationships, or should I say romance, has been portrayed as something that only exists between two people. But true love and affection should start within. Learning to love yourself, taking care of your body and mind, and embracing your uniqueness is at the core of developing a deeper understanding of what love truly means. Self-love doesn't have to mean being single or avoiding relationships. It's about recognizing your worth and treating yourself with the respect and compassion you deserve. Romantic relationships can only be truly fulfilling when both partners are able to show up as their authentic selves, and that begins with self-love. So many people are finding that solo romance and the act of basically nurturing oneself is not only empowering, but it's fundamental for cultivating healthy relationships with others. So let's redefine romance as something that starts within and radiates outward. It's not selfish to prioritize self-love. It's the foundation for all other forms of love. The slides have caught up with what I am talking about. I don't know. I may have just forgotten to make that slide. I don't know. And I also have the sniffles today, which is awful, but the show must go on. So sniffles or not, and whether or not the slides are up on the screen, the show must go on and the message has to be brought forth. So we shall continue. One of the most powerful ways that we can redefine romance is by breaking away from traditional gender roles in relationships. For decades, we've been taught that romance follows a specific script, right? The man pursues the woman plays coy, and certain expectations of behavior are assigned based on gender. But the truth is, love isn't bound by outdated gender norms. Today, people are exploring romantic dynamics where gender plays less of a defining role in how love is expressed and experienced. Gender fluidity and non-binary identities are reshaping the way that we approach relationships, allowing individuals to define their roles and the way they express love outside the binary. Whether it's a woman who wants to take the lead in a relationship and a man who enjoys being emotionally vulnerable, or a couple where both partners share equal footing, love today is more about partnership than roles. That's the key word is partnership. We have moved beyond the need for fixed structures, allowing for more authentic and fluid forms of romance. And honestly, relationships should be built on equality anyway. It should be built on equality, respect, and the freedom to be yourself, regardless of what society says about gender. Oh, I see what happened. My slides are just out of order in the way that I had planned to talk about these topics. That is so funny. All right. Well, first time it had to happen, right? I've been hosting this show since August. And haven't had one mishap. And it is now January? No, February? First week in February, and my slides are out of order. That's fine. Authenticity, right? It's what we talk about all the time here. So let me see if I can, here we go, fast forward. As a society becomes more accepting and open-minded, more accepting of my mistakes, just kidding. As society becomes more accepting and open-minded, we also start to celebrate non-traditional relationships, from open relationships to platonic partnerships, from long distance love to relationships that don't conform to conventional timelines. That's another big one. Timelines. Everyone feels like they're on a timeline. But people are creating their own versions of romantic connections that suit their unique needs. These relationships defy the traditional mold, and it's a beautiful thing. We're seeing more and more people building their love lives on their own terms rather than following a prescribed script. So let's take a moment to celebrate the uniqueness of each relationship. Not all love looks the same, and that's okay. Some relationships may never include living together or sharing financial obligations, but they're still deeply romantic and meaningful. Others may exist across distances, whether through travel or work or simply emotional separations, and they still manage to thrive in unconventional ways. Celebrating non-traditional relationships means that we embrace diversity, not only in romantic configurations, but also in the sense of like shared experiences that make each relationship special and valid. There's no right way to love. It's all about what works for the people involved. I'm just going to slide through here a little bit, guys. Okay. Well, ignore my slideshow and just listen to me talk, because I am missing a few topics in here that I felt would be very important. So I'm going to leave this slide up as to not confuse you guys and continue my spiel on this. I just feel like this is important. Then again, I know I say that in every episode, but I feel like the topics that I bring forth are very important, especially for modern day relationships. So one thing I'd like to say is no matter what type of relationship you're in, one of the keys to creating a healthy, fulfilling romance is setting and respecting boundaries. And I know we've talked about this quite a few times, but whether you're in a polyamorous relationship, a same-sex partnership, or a traditional monogamous connection, boundaries are essential for maintaining emotional safety and mutual respect. Boundaries help ensure that both parties feel heard, understood, and valued regardless of how the relationship is defined. Setting boundaries doesn't have to be hard or uncomfortable. You know, when I talk about boundaries, especially at a speaking engagement or a workshop, it's almost like the word budget. You know how people are like, budget, they don't like to talk about that. People don't like to talk about boundaries for some reason, but it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. Though it might feel awkward at first, it's simply about expressing what you need and having your desires clearly put out there and listening to the other person's needs as well. In a non-traditional relationship, boundaries are even more important because there may be multiple people involved, each with their own unique requirements. So healthy communication and mutual respect for one another's limits ensures that the relationships remain supportive, safe, and thriving. I couldn't go this episode without mentioning communication and boundaries. I mean, come on, guys. Now, even though we're seeing a rise in acceptance of non-traditional relationships, there's still a significant stigma surrounding certain types of love, like polyamory, queer relationships, and even asexuality. But even though those are often misunderstood by those who adhere to traditional ideas of romance, there shouldn't be a stigma. You know, for example, people may assume that poly relationships are just about sex, or that queer love is somehow lesser than a heteronormative romance. But these assumptions couldn't be further from the truth. It's important that we continue to discuss these types of relationships in order to break down the stigma. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do with today's episode. I had not yet touched on asexuality or aromantic partners, as well as queer love. We have focused quite a bit on open relationships because January was all about kinks and fetishes and polyamory and that type of communication, but we don't often talk about asexuality or even self-love. And so it's important that we talk about these things to break down the stigma and create a world where all forms of love are respected. Love is not one-dimensional. It's an evolving, beautiful force that can look completely different depending on the people involved. And we all deserve to love and be loved without judgment, shame, or misunderstanding. By continuing to share our stories and experiences, we help normalize non-traditional love and create a more inclusive, compassionate world where everyone can love freely and without fear. And for those of you that have a story, email me. I would love to, maybe shout it out during one of these episodes, but I would love to hear if you are in a quote unquote non-traditional relationship, or if you have experiences with self-love and romanticizing yourself. So as we've seen today, there are countless ways that people experience love and romance, from self-love to poly, from queer to platonic. Love is diverse. It's unique, it's personal. Embracing this diversity is about recognizing that everyone deserves to love on their own terms without the constraints of societal expectations. Period. Love is not a one-size-fits-all situation. That's something that we should celebrate and not shy away from, even though society tends to shy away from it. When we open our minds to the many forms of love, we create a more inclusive and compassionate world. We allow for deeper understanding, acceptance, and respect for people who love differently than we do. So whether you're in a traditional monogamous relationship or you've chosen a more unconventional route, remember that your love is valid. Embrace the love that works for you and be proud of it. Be proud of it. By doing so, we help normalize and celebrate love in all its beautiful forms. Communication. Let's talk about communication real quick. I didn't sit on it enough. As we wrap up today's episode, let's remember one thing above all else. I hope you said communication. Communication is the key in any relationship. Whether your relationship is traditional or non-traditional, communication ensures that both parties understand one another's needs, desires, and boundaries. When you communicate openly and honestly, you build a foundation of trust, respect, and intimacy that can weather any challenge. In relationships that go beyond the norm, whether that's polyamory, same-sex partnerships, asexual relationships, open communication becomes even more critical. It's about ensuring that everyone involved feels heard and respected and supported. So if you're thinking about exploring new forms of romance or redefining your existing relationships, keep that one core principle in mind. Communication is everything. It is literally everything. And I will always spend at least 60 seconds on that during every episode because it is so important. So important. Even when I have people with relationship woes that come see me, 9 times out of 10, it's a communication issue and nothing that was actually physically done wrong. You know what I mean? So that brings us to the end of today. I hope that this discussion has sparked something in you, whether it's a new perspective on love, a desire to redefine your relationships, or simply an appreciation for the beautiful diversity of how we connect with one another. Remember, love is an evolving personal journey, and it's up to you to define what it means for you. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to join me next week as we continue exploring relationships, intimacy, and everything in between. We also have a very fascinating interview at the end of February. So these next two episodes will continue talking about relationships and intimacy. And then, let's see, the last Tuesday of February, we will have a really interesting interview that you do not want to miss. Be sure to subscribe, follow, and share this episode with your friends. Contact information is here. Make sure to subscribe to Patreon for behind the scenes content. We have a monthly newsletter that goes out, a couple workshops. We really talk in depth about the episodes. So feel free to subscribe there. And as always, stay curious, stay safe, and take care of yourself and your loved ones.